Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry, and with me as always is...
I am turning 30 next week and I just want to go home and grow oranges! Edward. Of Edward is Truth.
And today we're talking about Identity, released April 25th, 2003. This is I guess 19 years old now. Almost 20.
Wow.
And oddly enough, we've been talking about this movie for a while now, about revisiting it. Don't squint your eyes at me. We have. But a lot of people...
It was a smile. Let the record show.
I saw a squint. But a lot of people have been asking if we would ever do this movie.
Really?
Like, even requesting it. Yeah. Even like I've seen comments on YouTube and like especially on Patreon. So it just worked out very serendipitously that like we had planned to do this for a while now. We kind of had our first run of episode. This is episode 25 now.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, not that like we've separated these into seasons or anything, but I feel like I had already like promoted what our first 24 episodes were gonna be, and now I feel like from this point on it'll be a secret. You know, well, you'll find out in like the end of the week before what we're doing next week.
Right.
But,
Right.
Yeah, this had been planned for a while, but we didn't tell anyone. So yeah, Identity. This is a movie starring John Cusack. It's got Ray Liotta. It's got actually a really great cast. Like everyone in this movie, because you've got Alfred Molina,
Amanda Peet, Alfred Molina, Ray Liotta, Clea Duvall.
Clea Duvall, yeah, from
Jake Busey, Rebecca De Mornay.
I love her.
Who I did not recognize. I did not recognize her, though. It was crazy.
And John Hawkes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So actually, like just a really good ensemble of people. And obviously,
what's it about, Zach?
Well, is that where you want to come in? I'll just say this is a this is a murder mystery with a twist. With a lot of twists. And why don't you go ahead and you lead us in with a synopsis.
Let's just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Loosely based on Agatha Christie's 1939 whodunnit, and then there were none. A convict awaits execution for a vicious mass murder. His journals, now newly discovered, not introduced during the trial, prompt his appointed psychiatrist and the defense attorney to argue for the consideration of this evidence at a midnight hearing just prior to Malcolm's execution date. Meanwhile, 10 strangers find themselves stranded in the middle of a torrential rainstorm at a remote Nevada motel. The group consists of an ex-cop, now limousine driver, a washed-up, irritable actress, a police officer transporting a convicted murderer, a sex worker, 2 young newlyweds, and a family of 3. With both ends of the nearest road completely flooded, the group is temporarily cut off from the rest of the world as they are mysteriously killed off, one by one, left to contemplate and decipher what could possibly be the killer's identity.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
When did you first see Identity?
at first, I can't remember if it was a rental or if it was just me borrowing my sister's DVD, because I'm pretty sure she did own this while we were still occupying the same space. And I just remember watching it at home in the afternoon. I'd heard good things, so I was interested, and I watched it, and, you know.
Yeah, you know how it goes.
How about you?
Well, this is 2003, so this would have released right around the time I was finishing high school. And, I mean, high school sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, for most people, I'm sure. But
some
the
people
only...
miss it, but not me.
Yeah, the only solace I really had during those years was horror movies. And I remember, you know, I would try to go to as many new releases as possible. And I think I probably explained this before. Like, a lot of the times I would have to get my mom to take me because it was R-rated or whatever the equivalent was here in Canada, because I couldn't go in on my own. And I'm not sure if this was one of them, because I can't remember if I did see it with her or I saw it with friends. But I just remember it was one of those movies I had gone to. And I think, like, a lot of the movies that were coming out around this time were not great. I don't know if does this predate Freddy vs. Jason, or did that come before? I don't know.
It's 2003,
yeah.
so isn't that the same year?
This came out in April, so I'm just not sure if it was before or after Freddy vs. Jason. But, you know, like, a lot of the horror movies at that time were just very disappointing to me. But I was still happy to be getting horror movies and to seeing horror movies, because even if I didn't like them, I always had a whole back catalog of older movies that I would continuously watch on repeat anyway. But I saw this one, and I mean, I guess it's like, this is classified as a mystery thriller. Obviously there are a lot of horror elements in it, because, you know, there's a killer on the loose and people are dying in brutal ways. But I just remember I was really into it. I was, like, really into the mystery, and then there's a twist. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who haven't seen this, so we're gonna try to we'll eventually get to spoilers in here. I feel I don't want to reveal anything. I think you should. Anyone who's listening who hasn't seen this should go out and watch it. I don't know where it's available or streaming. I
mean, you can rent it on Redbox. You can rent it on Apple Plus. You can rent it on YouTube. So it's findable. It's streamable.
Okay. But I'll just say this of the twist, as it were, towards the end. It's one of those things. Like, it was a very risky thing. Like, I could see it being very unsuccessful with probably a lot of younger like people who were my age at that time who would go see a movie like that and probably be like, the fuck is this? And I was just like, that's different. But I don't remember when I revisited it next, but I feel like every time I've watched the movie since, like, knowing what happens, I'm still fully engrossed in it. Like, there's still more that I get out of it every time I watch it. Because we did Us last week, and I talked about how it's just like, I can watch that twice and I'm good. I don't need to watch it again, as beautiful as it is and everything. But this movie, I'm just like, I found myself so, like, not just like mentally engrossed, but like emotionally engrossed in it as well. At that, like, I was just like, oh my god, I love this movie. And I'm sure that this is a movie, like, there's probably a lot of people who are like, this is not it's nothing special. But, you know, you and I have talked about this. It's like, it's special for me, and that's all that matters.
So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I commend you on your attachment to this property. But that said, I think in light of this, and in light of Knives Out, another Agatha Christie adaptation, or Agatha Christie style adaptation, you know, I think Agatha Christie just is not my jam. There's something about this particular structure and the way it can be executed, and seems like in some of its most kind of like mainstream, or I don't know how this movie isn't hidden. It's not an indie film, right?
I don't think that it's not hidden. I've heard a lot of people classify this as being underrated, and I don't think that it's underrated. I think that it's like proportionately rated for like, you know, the quality of it and what people seem to think. They're just like, it's a good film, with a good twist. Like I don't hear a lot of like, oh fuck that movie, or like, you know, like really like poor reception, and I don't hear a lot of like, this is the best movie there ever is. So I think that this is just a very under the radar movie. You know, again, like early 2000s, like a lot of stuff got mixed in the shuffle. You have to remember, this is like the early 2000s. Everything was changing, like especially in cinema, mostly due to 9/11, because that was when, like, I don't think horror was really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. There was more so just like, it was like movies about espionage and things like that, because people like counterterrorism and stuff. So it's, you know, when horror movies were few and far between, and when horror movies came out, they were still kind of trying to, you know, follow the Scream template. And at that point, like, that well had dried up. So, you know, a lot of horror movies were unsuccessful. And then I think eventually it got to, because Saw came out a year later, as well as, and we also had Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Dawn of the Dead remakes. So that's when it was just like, okay, remakes and torture porn, that's what people were like all about at that time. But like there was a transition there in the early 2000s where it's just like, we're not really sure, like people are very afraid about life, and you know, like just there are certain things that, you know, worked successfully in the theater and certain things that just bombed. And I didn't look up to see, you know, how well this movie did. I know that it got a good review, because I distinctly remember reading Roger Ebert's review of it when it came out, because I was just like, what does this guy have to say about horror movies? You know, because it was always negative, and it was just like, oh, okay, like he's saying it's good. That might mean that it's not good, but you know, it turned out to be good for me. So it's train of thought, completely lost it there.
You were talking about the trajectory of basically horror and where it was landing, and this one I think is kind of an outlier in terms of just like trends of horror. Like, it didn't seem to be following any particular trends. I mean, and also the fact that it's a thriller and leans more into like mystery thriller than maybe, or leans into mystery thriller as much as it does into horror. I think is to its credit. The thing that I'm going to try to speak without spoilers here, but the problem for me, I think, is that before the twist is revealed, or the movie's, you know, secret is kind of revealed to us in its full form, and the characters are made as conscious of what's been going on this whole time as we are in real time. That there's so little time left once that discovery is made by the core character and us, that it actually kind of disappoints me, because I feel like everything that preceded it, I don't have the same reaction that you do watching the movie. I feel like everything prior to that reveal, once the reveal happens, I feel like, oh, we got a good movie. But prior to that, I feel like I'm watching kind of just like a really poorly handled whodunit, and I feel like characters who I don't find particularly interesting, aside from arguably Paris. I think Paris is probably my window in, because she seems to be genuinely concerned about people like Ginny, and also she's the first one to really kind of push up against. I was going to say up against Ed. Paris.
Paris is the quote unquote hooker, and I say
worker,
well, whatever her current situation is. But the thing that I found about that, because like there's several characters, actually mostly just the motel manager, played by John Hawkes, who's just giving her, is just like, is that a hooker? And then just being like really disrespectful and like literally calling her out as a hooker. And I'm just like looking at her and just like, she's not dressed overly like provocative or anything. Like I wouldn't look at her and just think that's a hooker. So it's just like, I don't know if that was just like maybe a fuck up on like the wardrobe department, or like just like, or she wasn't giving enough like hooker vibes, but I just like, I didn't see it. And I remember when I saw it in the theater for the first time, I was just like she, like, there's nothing about her that just like screams sex worker. Other than like that we see that flashback of her memory.
Right. With the man with the cake on his
and she's and even then she's like dressed up like she's like more like a call girl in that. She's like looks like an expensive hooker there. So
well, I think there's an argument to be made. I mean, I don't know when we're going to start into spoilers, but I feel like the spoiler in and of itself might be a way to kind of like answer any kind of things they might pick up on about each other.
Okay, well, we'll get to that later then.
Okay, cool. Okay. But she is my window in because she's also, I felt like watching John Cusack again, like great. I agree with you. Great cast. Like I love the people. We also didn't bring up John C. McGinley, I don't think, but and everybody, even the people whose names I didn't know before going in, like this guy William Lee Scott who plays Lou, the newlywed husband. And Layla Kenzel, who plays Alice, the wife, and anybody. So John Cusack, talk about an actor who, the second he's on screen, like I like him. I'm with him. Like I feel like I can trust him, and I liked that. On one hand, I liked the fact that like I could kind of like trust him to, I guess, be motivated by something kind of almost noble, That said, he really kind of assumed the role of the MacReady pretty early in this movie once the group started to kind of, become a group. Yeah. And I like the fact that Amanda Peet's character, Paris, is the first one to really just kind of like look him in the eye and go like, you know what? You're not a cop anymore. So, this isn't your job. It's not your job to save anybody or whatever the fuck she says. She just kind of like just stops him in his tracks and goes like, listen, I think she's, and also you're not in control. Yeah, like she goes back to her room because like they're all told like stay put in, I guess, like the main lounge or like the first room where the family is. Once they know that there's like a killer, like someone has died. And she goes back into her room because like she's supposedly stolen this money. That's what she's, taking to start her life over and buy that orange grove and whatever. So she goes back to her room to check on it. And that's where he sneaks up behind her and he's just like, what are you doing in here? And then that's when she's just like, what business is that of yours? Like, what are you doing in here? This is my room. Right. Right, exactly. Yeah. and I like, me. I mean, I'm a fan of Childs. Like we're talking The Thing, MacReady and Childs, if anybody's wondering and hasn't seen that episode yet. But I like the person who questions the one who is assuming authority and kind of like trying to hold dominion over the group, for better or worse. Like I do trust him, but I also think like, dude, you're moving into this rescue. Like people are dying, and you're not really preventing it, so you need to kind of like step back and recognize that you're just as out of control as everybody else here. Maybe a little less, because some people get really emotional, and that's another thing. It's just like, okay, I don't know how many minutes are devoted to the fight between Ginny and Lou, the newlyweds, but between that bathroom door, or even before that, when it's revealed that like they got married. They just got married because apparently she claimed she was pregnant, and now she reveals that she isn't pregnant. Yeah. But the reason she let him marry her or wanted him to marry her is because a girlfriend of hers told her that she saw him with some other girl, and he even has a line in response. It's just kind of like, "Are we in fucking junior high or something like that?" And I'm just kind of like, and she's just poor Clea Duvall. I adore her as an actress. Yeah. I felt so bad for her watching her as an actress, having to sit there and just be diminished to this weepy, irrational, emotional girl character who's just kind of like, I just want you to calm down sorry, open the door. I don't know what I'm doing. It's so beneath her when I know what she's capable of. So that upset me. Does that make sense?
No, I totally get that. I'm not upset at all because like all of these characters here, like it just like for me, it's just like you're adding more texture to the story with these people, and that's pretty much like at that point, that's kind of like where that story really ends anyway, just in terms of like their shotgun marriage. But interestingly, because I was watching Blu-ray special features and there were some deleted scenes and I wanted to watch through them. And one of the deleted scenes was an extended scene between them, which just continues on after they enter the room. Like when they close the door and the 6 swings upside down and it's the 9. And they have a fight there. So I can see why it was taken out, because it's just like you're just kind of hitting the same beat that you're going to hit later on. And I'm glad that this is like, I'm kind of glad they took this out, but at the same time I'm not, because it does give us more with Amanda Peet. And in the scene, Clea Duvall calls out her newlywed husband for like staring at Amanda Peet's breast, but she says, she's like, oh, we're going to talk about how you were staring at that hooker's breasts. So again, it was like more characters just assuming that, you know, she's a hooker or whatever, even though she is, you know. But I'm glad it was taken out, because it makes her, like, 'cause she's already an annoying character for being that weepy archetype that you described, but now she's being judgmental of a character who we're already more connected with. Considerably with Paris, but also just because Paris is like the one that's kind of like consoling her later. Like she's the one that's like, you know, taking care of all these people after you know, people start getting murdered. And it's the funny part, like the best part about this scene is that like no sooner do they start screaming about that Paris comes and knocks on the door, and they open it and she's just standing there in the rain, and she's like, hey, 3 things. First of all, it's just like, I really appreciate the fact that you guys gave us a lift to the motel when we were stranded there. That was like super cool of you. Second thing, these walls are really thin, so I'd appreciate it if you could keep the hooker talk down to a minimum. And third, Lou, yes, you were staring at my tits. Because I think like his argument is like, I was not staring at her tits. And she's okay, good night. So I mean, I can see why they took it out, but at the same time, like we lost like a really good moment with her. There was another scene that was taken.
I would have liked that.
Yeah, there was another scene that was taken out, which it was pretty much redundant. Like that was all the scenes that were taken out, and it was with Rebecca De Mornay, because I guess what had initially happened was she got a motel room. And she didn't like it, so she moved to another room, and that was the room when Ray Liotta's character came with his convict, Busey, and the motel manager was taking them to that room, and then we're surprised to see her in there, and just like, what are you doing in here? And she's like, that room you gave me was a shithole, so I just moved here. And they're like, whatever. But that was the thing about that scene, because as I was watching the movie, because you know how I'm always like looking out for details and just get really pissed off if there's like a goof or a continuity error, because he gave her a key to room 8, and later on when we see her when she goes out into the rain to like get her signal, like her cell phone bar, she's coming out of room 9. So I was just like, but he gave her a key to room 8. And I even looked on like IMDb, and that's like the first goof that comes up, but that deleted scene shows us that that's the reason why. So I mean, I respect that, you know, it wasn't a goof, but they took that scene out because it was unnecessary. They didn't need it. I think the director said that it just slowed down the pace, because at that point they were kind of building up this tension before the first murder. And I agree. I think that the pacing in this movie is actually really good. There's no lulls for it. I know that you talked about like the scene with the couple arguing, but I would even argue that like that's important because it's basically it proceeds and leads into the second murder.
But I understand that, like, structurally, like what it is and what it does in terms of like putting us in the bathroom with Ginny, Clea Duvall's character, and setting up tension because we are now in that bathroom with her. We no longer know what is happening on the other side of that door, and that sets up
we know
a mystery. I get that
because there's like we hear him say, "What are you doing here?" So the killer who enters. Yeah. But then there's silence, but then he starts banging on the door again. So that's almost a clue because it just let like whoever did come in the room, he just ignored them anyway and continued to do what he did, and that person went and killed him. So I mean that might have been a clue, might not have been. I will say, okay, if there was a scene that, and I don't think this was an unnecessary scene, but I think it could have been maybe, I don't know, I just when Ed, who's the John Cusack character, is kind of telling his backstory or like why he stopped being a cop, I couldn't understand what he was saying, and I don't know if it was just like the volume was too low, but I didn't care enough to like go back and listen again. I just like it wasn't relevant. All I was getting out of that is like he was like connecting with her, and that's all I needed to know when he was telling this to Paris.
Right. But see, that's the thing about this movie is that, like, I don't think, like, that's the thing. I don't feel like the actors are doing a bad job as far as, like, kind of, like, expositing, like, whatever it is that, you know, these characters are supposed to represent or, you know, be feeling or whatever, how they're supposed to interact with each other. And I don't even feel like it's shot in a way that is like kind of interminably boring or anything like that. So I had to ask myself, why am I checking out so much? I actually did fall asleep about 20 minutes in, ran it back, because I think I remembered up until about the 10-minute mark, watched it again, fell asleep about 30 minutes in, and had to run it back again to the 10-minute mark and really maintain focus. And also I'm very tired, so maybe there's that. But
well, I was gonna say, ironically, like I'm the one that usually falls asleep when I watch movies, and I watched the whole thing through, and I started watching this at 6 a.m. I had like a very busy day into night into days. So,
right. No, but for me it was literally, I think, because also we've whenever we discuss movies, like the things that we tend to hook into, for me, of course, it is the interpersonal, it's, you know, the character arc and all of that kind of thing. And with this, I felt like I couldn't really, even though the one I could hitch onto the most was Paris, but even with her, like something about like the way it was written. I have to talk about Michael Cooney's screenplay. I felt like I was at a certain point just kind of watching things happen. Like, not in any kind of context, but it's just like, oh, now that person's meeting that person, and now that person is expressing their opinion on that person they just met, and now we're finding out about the context of this character. But I think one thing that maybe, if I also want to fault James Mangold for one thing as a director, the director's responsibility in my eyes is to answer the question, why, for the audience, why are you showing me this? And I don't feel like James Mangold had a good answer for me, at least insofar as like everything that was predated like the reveal. Like I felt like it almost should have been a jumble. I almost feel like if I'd known that a little bit earlier, like maybe if we had like a really nice long opening sequence, we could have done everything we did with the first hour and 15 minutes of the movie, and then really taken advantage of what follows.
We're almost 30 minutes into this, so I'm gonna say, like, I'm gonna cap it here in terms of like non-spoiler conversation. So if you haven't, for some chance that you have not seen this and you are intrigued enough that you want to check it out, like, stop listening, go watch the movie, come back and pick up at the 30-minute mark. But at this point, we're going to discuss what the twist of the movie is. So I'm going to start talking about...
you don't want to find out from us.
I'm going to start talking about that right now. So the movie starts off, as you said in your synopsis, where there's this gathering of like legal counsel and all this to determine the fate of this inmate who has murdered several people and is on death row, and his lawyer and psychiatrist are there to prove that he is not responsible for these murders because he actually has multiple personality or dissociative personality disorder.
Right.
And
Right.
one of these personalities is the one that committed the murder, and everyone else, including the man himself, are innocent. So this is all part of an experimental treatment that they have set up for him, in which all of his personalities are going to confront each other for the first time. And that is the movie that we are watching play out at this motel with all of these people. Right. And we don't know that until this is revealed when John Cusack kind of hears these voices and, comes to like his consciousness and sees himself in this room talking to all these lawyers and judges and people. And they tell him, like, you're not real. You're just a personality of this person. And
he sees his reflection.
He sees his reflection. It's not his face. Actually, the guy who plays him, the Malcolm.
Yes, Pruitt Taylor Vince.
Yeah, he's doing such a. I mean, I always talk about, like, anytime like an actor plays more than one role, and he's like he's doing all of that, or at least like the ones that are present when he does it. But then he's also like jumping back to himself and all this, but he's doing this thing with his eyes, and I'm just like looking at him like, how is he doing? He's just like rapidly like moving his eyes back and forth. And I'm just like, oh my god, that's crazy. So
I have a cousin who can do that, but she can't act, so it is more than just the eye trick. But it's I've seen my cousin do it. It's really fun. But
anyway, so
he makes it work. He's a great actor. I loved his performance. I think he's my favorite performance of the movie.
Okay,
actually.
Yeah. So anyway, they explain to him that like what's gonna happen is that this judge is going to rule that you in 18 hours you're going to get the electrical chair or lethal injection, and it's our job right now to prove that this man is innocent. One of the people you've met tonight is the killer, and you have to kill them in order for this to be over, so he can be, his life can be saved. So that's the twist. That's the big twist. And this comes very late because John Cusack goes back into the motel world, the consciousness of this man with the remaining personalities who are still alive, and then the movie plays out at that point. I'm curious to know from you what it was specifically that you were talking about, I guess, in terms of like things that should have been revealed early on that weren't revealed until later. I'm just curious now that we can discuss that.
Okay, cool. Because I couldn't connect with the characters, I didn't find what they were going through interesting enough to sustain me. And then once we finally revealed that like this is not an actual tangible, corporeal, world. It's all happening inside this man's head. It's like it's like a motel of the mind. Yeah. And all the personalities are, if not duking it out, like he said, like Alfred Molina's character, the doctor, Dr. Malik, makes a point to say like we knew there would be casualties or something like that. We knew there'd be losses. That was to be expected, but like one of them has to be killed and all that. Once we have that information, I'm just kind of, also because of the greatness of the performance, because we do stay with John Cusack at first before we pop back to Pruitt Taylor Vince playing Malcolm Rivers, the killer who has the dissociative disorder. Yeah. Both of those performances are riveting. So finally you're showing me something that doesn't feel like a scene I've seen hundreds of times before. It doesn't just kind of feel like a hack thriller to me. I feel like, what is going on? And even though it's the psychology of it is still kind of sketchy, because it's like, how can you be certain who the killer is? Like, how can you be certain that only one of the personalities even is a killer, which leads to actually another twist within a twist later. But for me, that's when the movie really starts, and I checked the time signature and saw there was 15 more minutes basically of like runtime, including the end credits, and I just thought, if we could have found this out a lot earlier, I feel like we could have really expedited the action at the motel as like a reasonable place. But I even think that premise, which is not a premise because it doesn't precede anything, but that whole idea of like this motel of the mind and like this character who is responsible for killing off another character, like if you make it about him, he has to go back into as an avatar, as it were, into this world, and can't show his hand too quickly because he can't. If he does, other personalities might die. You immediately set up even more tension, and you make the other personalities in that world mean more to me, and you make the deaths mean more to me. Do you know what? Like, if you put it all in context, if I know earlier, it means more. And I thought that would have been. I
understand what you're saying, and I'm not gonna lie. Like, I would be interested to see that movie as well, but I think that the movie works well for what it is, because like I said, this is a movie that I could go back and rewatch again and again, because you see all the clues, you see the certain things, because there's a lot of incongruencies that are just like, what's going on. I think one of the first times is when Jake Busey's character, who's the convict who's been handcuffed to the toilet, when he escapes and he's running away from the motel, and he runs to another motel, and it's the same motel, because it's like this video game where you can't actually leave. Like there's borders to what you're playing, so you just kind of like end up back in the same scenario. So that was the first thing, and it was just kind of like, how did I get back here? But the movie keeps going on despite that, and you forget about it. Like it's buried in your mind, but you're more engrossed in the action that you're not really thinking about, like, are we going to talk about what we just saw? Because now there's new stakes that have been added and more people are dying. So I think there was actually one instance that I actually thought about after the fact. I'm like, maybe they should have revealed this sooner. And that was the fact that Ray Liotta's character was also a convict, because we see early on in the movie, like after he arrives, and this is right before the first murder, where everyone's kind of like mulling about in their own business, and like the tension is kind of brewing, and you see Ray Liotta just sitting in the motel room with the guy chained up, and at this point we think that he's the cop, and he gets up and he turns around, and we see that he has a hole in the back of his shirt with a blood stain, and he just puts his jacket back on over it. So right there, like, beautiful red herring of just like setting up something that we don't find out until way later, and he takes off. So he's now a suspect, when the murder happens right after that. And the twist of, finding out that everything is all personalities in this guy's head happens, but then we come back to the motel, and we're with Paris, and she's just kind of like standing there while Ray Liotta and John Hawkes, who plays the motel manager, are the only people who are still alive, and I forget what it is that they're looking for at that point. But she kind of notices something weird. She goes over to the police car, and she sees that, like, it's been hot wired. She opens up the glove compartment, finds the department of the gloves, and finds the I guess like the prisoner transport files, which has the mugshot of both the Jake Busey character, who had already been killed after being tied up, and Ray Liotta. And it does, and I also love this, how the movie does its flashbacks. It kind of does this like freeze frame.
Oh my god! It jumps back to like sick of that.
No, I loved it. I loved it. And they did it, and they did it with her, even though it's not her flashback. But they're showing how, just explaining why he had that hole on the back of his shirt, because the actual police officer who was transporting them, he unscrewed some bolts in the back of the seat, and then like took a shank and just kicked it through. So that's how he killed that guy, and then assumed his identity. For the rest of the movie. And I thought about that. I'm just like, well, why? It just seemed very like posthumous to everything that was like happening. Like, we'd already gotten the big twist in the movie, so like, why are we finding this out now? Like, it's not as interesting. It's almost like we've already dealt with a big twist, and now we have like a little minor twist. So I was thinking, like, had they revealed that before we found out that everyone was a personality? But then I thought about it. I'm just like, no, because at this point, there's still we're being led to believe that Ray Liotta is the killer personality, as it were. So it's more misdirection. It's more things that are misleading us to, assume certain things, that when, like, by the time the movie ends at the very last scene and we do get the reveal of who the actual killer is, it's still as, like, silly and like very campy as it is. I'm just like, oh wow, like I really like that, because it threw me for a loop. I didn't see it coming.
I did dig that. We'll get to that in a second, but just to address the whole Ray Liotta of it all, the fact that they cast Ray Liotta in that role as quote unquote Officer Rhodes, that for me, I don't trust Ray Liotta anytime he's on screen. So, and also just he seemed sketchy. Like, there did seem to be other things about him. Like, he seemed to want to assume power and control as much as Ed did, but I just didn't get that feeling of nobility from Ray Liotta as I do from John Cusack. And even, and like I said, even John Cusack, I was like, you better check yourself, buddy. And you, Ray Liotta, you need to really, like, dial it down, because you're getting in people's faces and screaming at them accusingly, like he does with John Hawk's character Larry, like with the I mean, that is an elaborate kill too. The baseball bat down the throat. That was interesting. I'd never seen that before. But but just like everything about him just seemed suspicious to me. And I do remember that the first time around. I remember I never trusted him once when I didn't know the twist of the movie.
That's the beauty of a murder mystery. Like, you have to have red herrings. That's like, that's like Cotton Weary in Scream 2, or, it's like, it's important to have, because it's like, it's too obvious that there's no way that that's going to be the person who's the killer. And also, by the way, R.I.P. Ray Liotta, like a month ago.
It was pretty recent.
Yeah, very recent.
He's a good actor.
Yeah.
Good actor.
Hannibal.
I was thinking Goodfellas, but sure, Hannibal too.
I try to keep this within the horror genre, but
the horror genre. I know you do.
We'll get to Hannibal at some point.
Yes.
For an episode. But I was just thinking. Oh shit. There I go again. Ray Liotta. Were you talking about how obvious? How obvious it was? Because I mean, like, that was that. Like, you need that. Like, because you got to have all these threads of, like, who it could be. Because I mean, like, even at a certain point, with the fact that, like, here you have John Cusack's character, and he, I mean, as much as he's, like, in power and in control, like you said, he was like the MacReady of this movie. Like, even in The Thing, MacReady was a suspect for a lot of people, including the audience, because we find the shredded long johns with his name on it.
Yes.
So that, it's just the fact that every single person, I mean, not every single person, but for the most part, there's a lot of people who, if they don't necessarily have motive, they have, like, suspicion cast on them that they, it could be them. With Ray Liotta, like, what I liked about that, because, like, he kind of, like, just his presence there, because I mean, like, you talk about how Amanda Peet is, like, the one who, pushes up against people and is there, but I look at Ray Liotta, and he kind of comes in and he's the one that upsets the status quo. Like, not necessarily Paris, not Ed, because he's coming in there and he's, supposed to be, like, he's the cop. He's supposed to be, if anyone, the one who's the savior in this scenario. And even in that conversation you mentioned earlier, where Paris says to Ed, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? You have no business doing this. And he points out, like, well, the only person, like, the one officer, he's already lost a convict. Like, here's all the ways that he's already fucked up. So
right.
It's nice that, we have this character come in, and everything is, like, that he's doing is, like, cognitively telling us that, like, he's bad, even though it's just, like, we don't really know that at first. I think one of the first exchanges he has with a character is when Paris is at the vending machine, and he's kind of like coming up, and he's just like, oh yeah,
Creep.
like that's like, how did you do that? And he's like, what's this? And this is probably one of my favorite lines when he's like, what's your name? And she goes, Paris. Or she does it in her like southern, like, like her twang.
Paris.
Yeah.
Paris.
And he's like, oh yeah, I've never been. She's like, well, you ain't going tonight. And just brushes him off and like walks away.
And I think that, you know what, I'm glad that you brought up that scene, because that's also probably another sliver of like what turned me against him, because I'm just like, you fucking creep, stop looking at her.
Yeah.
And and it's just, but I think it's also a case of because like you mentioned, like he is the one who upsets the status quo and everything like that. But the problem is, I can never get behind him when he does it. I don't ever think like, exactly, that's the voice we need right now. I never feel that way.
Well, are we supposed to though?
Well, no, but I mean, if you're talking about it like it's a good thing, I'm saying my experience is never like, oh, good, somebody's upsetting. Except when Paris does it, I'm like, I'm glad somebody's saying it.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between those two characters.
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
the way
Like
they
there should be more than one person upsetting the status quo, but it just like, it depends on like what the tone is and how you respond to each one of them. So obviously, as the audience, we're going to be more. Sure. Team Paris than, Team Rhodes. Or,
hopefully, after all the abuse she fucking takes from these men. But I also feel like, I think ultimately, like, and I mentioned this earlier with, like, the Agatha Christie adaptation thing. I think ultimately, because I ran into a similar problem with, like, Knives Out, and I don't know that many other Agatha Christie adaptations. If anybody knows of one, Edward is Truth on Instagram. I'll say it again at the end, but yeah, DM me. Let me know. Let me know if there's something I should watch.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing that I come up against with the mystery part of it and the way it's handled, is that it always feels a little detached for my taste. I will say I did, after the reveal, get more on board with especially once Ed knew the context and knew that he could speak to Paris on like another level, and never in a way that he could explain everything that's going on in a way that she would understand or even believe, but in a way that he could just kind of send her off and try to, I don't care if I go down, I just care that guy doesn't get to live and get to kill off everybody else. So one of us who deserves a second chance gets, is the one who needs, and I'm gonna go down fighting for whoever that person is, and it ended up being her. And that whole exchange, whether it's the scene as enacted between John Cusack and Amanda Peet, or the scene as enacted by Pruitt Taylor Vince on his own, which was beautiful. Either way, like, I found that profoundly moving. And again, that's why, like, kind of knowing where you are and what's going on would have helped earlier in this movie for me than like because otherwise it just kind of feels like I can see the mechanism, I can see the exoskeleton of like like with this thing that you're building, the architecture of it and everything like that. I understand why it all needs to be there. It just doesn't send me. I need that extra little like, why do I care, And I got it, but very late.
I don't know. I see, what I like is the fact that, again, like with the red herrings of it all, nobody knows what's going on. Like, there's even a point where Amanda Peet has like her Jennifer Love Hewitt moment where she's just I forget what the exact line is, but she's just like, I don't know, I give up, just tell me.
Yes. I was expecting her to scream, "What are you waiting for?" But she did scream something else. It was like, "Oh, why are you doing this?" or something like that.
I think she's something about like, "I give up." Just like, what do you want, or something like that.
Yeah, what do you want? Probably, yeah.
But what I love about that is because it's like, it's not so much as like figuring out the who, but the why. And this was, kind of presented in like several different threads that it might have been. A lot of it actually brought up by Clea Duvall's character, because she says something to the effect of, it has something to do with the Indian burial ground that she saw in in the brochure. And so it's just like, it introduces this thread that it could be supernatural. And we're kind of already shown that it might be, because when Jake Busey's character runs away from the motel and then runs directly back into it before, just like, maybe there is something supernatural that's keeping everyone there. But then she also brings up, she's just like, she actually quotes or just references the 10 Strangers play, and because she says like maybe there's a connection between us all. And at first they're just like, well, where are you from? Where were you going?
Where's everybody from? Yeah.
And what I liked about that, because there were certain characters that didn't want it, because I think it was probably the Ray Liotta character. It was just like, that's, none of your business, or, things like that, or, like people like at that point had to like come up with lies on the spot. And it wasn't until they all realized that they all had the same birthday, because obviously they have the same birthday as Malcolm. And I also thought of something else that I thought was funny, because at the hearing, Alfred Molina says Malcolm is in the midst of I forget what he said, but I was like, Malcolm in the midst, and it's just like Malcolm in the middle, like the television show.
Moving on.
But shut up. That show was still on at the time that this movie came out, so I felt it was intentional. I felt it was intentional, but I know early in the movie, when they're like at the beginning, when the credits are still on, and they're kind of like setting up that we're coming in for this like midnight hearing, and patient X or inmate X, and they're just like birth date May 10th, whatever. So then later on in the movie, there's like all these conversations, and I think that the first one is when it's that scene that you referenced where Paris is pushing up against Ed when she's just like, what is this all about? And she's just like, when's your birthday or something? And he's just like, May, and she's like, Taurus, just like me. It's just like first hint right there that everyone had the same birthday. But then later on, because she does that, she's like, I'm turning 30 next week, and I just want to like your opening quote,
go home and grow oranges.
And then they're like, oh, your birthday's next week, mine too, and they're just like May 10th. Yes. And then they're all having this realization, and I love how everyone says it, and then John Cusack is just like, yeah. But then they go and look at all the licenses, and everyone has the same exact birthday. Yes. So that's probably the scene where she's like, I don't get it, I give up, because none of it does make any sense, because literally all of these people have arrived at the motel by chance, because you have the initial inciting incident of the limo hitting the wife, and then them going to the motel, and then him driving off and getting stuck in the water, like the flooded road with Paris, who he picked up, but then Ginny and Lou drive over there, and they pick up Ed and Paris, and they all go back to the motel. So it's just like all these chance encounters of all these people. Like if you were to like go through the odds of just like how likely it would be that this would all happen to 10 or 11 people, and every single one of them would have the exact same birthday, like it's unheard of. That's why that's the mystery. It no longer becomes like, who is it? It's the why. And when we get that reveal, which to me is when John Cusack goes into the mind of just and being present in that room, and they tell him, that makes everything worth it, because I wasn't watching a different movie. I wasn't wondering like who the killer could be. I was more so wondering like why, like how is this possible? Because there's so many things in this that make absolutely no sense, and that had everything make sense, that by the time we got back to it, I felt satisfied, because I was watching a mystery where they were throwing all these things that I couldn't possibly tell where it was going to land, and that's where it landed. So I disagree with you on the fact of like that should have been revealed early on, because I think that then that just becomes like the rest of the movie just becomes who is it, whereas I feel like the pretending that the mystery was a like whodunit, rather than a why done it, and then figuring out why, and then letting the last 15 minutes be like, okay, well, it's this guy, so we're just gonna like quickly take them out. So that's why I feel differently from you.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just it's a long sit for me.
Yeah.
For something that just doesn't kind of like pay off.
It's
because it doesn't fuel my engine the way it does for you. Like
it's
the
a
first
very
hour and 15 minutes.
I mean, like, because the first hour and 15 minutes, like it is a very generic premise. Like, you know, just the strangers at a motel and all that. So I can understand why, you know, it just seems like a very unremarkable movie, you know, up until that point. But
right.
I don't know if you noticed this, but the killer is actually, and we haven't even mentioned who the killer is, but the killer is revealed. You actually see them right before the first murder takes place. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
So the killer, who's little Timmy, as we find out, the little boy, who's the son of the husband and wife, or the stepson of or at least the the man,
the kid.
Yeah. He right at the scene where we kind of like go to the actress's room, Rebecca De Mornay's character, and she is, you know, having this conversation in the mirror. She's just like, it's not about the money, it's about the working conditions.
That was almost the line I said at the top of this episode.
I wish that you had.
No, I like
that would have been
Amanda
a
Peets
better
better,
one.
but go on. No, I like Amanda Peets better, but go on.
But if you look in the background, you can see in the window a silhouette walks up. You just see them behind the curtain, but then the lightning flashes and you see Timmy's face in the curtain.
Oh, okay. No, didn't notice that at all. I'm glad we're talking about Timmy now, because that was another thing that occurred to me that I think kind of like pulled me out of the movie for a few seconds here and there. Like it kept recurring to me because, especially this, I've only seen the movie twice now, but I did remember the ultimate spoiler, you know. And while I was watching it this time, I think that actually dragged down the experience for me, because I didn't get more out of it knowing like what was going on. I was just kind of like, oh, because right. But the question that it brought up for me also was just in terms of like, and I don't need, you know, I mean, I understand it's a movie, like it you know, it doesn't need to be like 100% like psychologically accurate or anything like that, because what movies are. But I did wonder, like, because I have seen some other movies that depict dissociative disorder, and I've never seen personalities that are either intercoupled or like related in a familial sense, like where somebody is the father, the mother, and the child, all of like one family, or where they're both members of a couple, you know, like they're dating each other. I've never seen that, and I feel like that was another thing that was just kind of like maybe thrown in, so it wasn't just like a literal group of 10 strangers who who are just individuals. I mean, I would have found that even more interesting too, I think, though, just like, you know.
Well, what about Raising Cain? Because when you've never seen it, Brian De Palma, John Lithgow. We should do that one. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Okay.
But there's a scene where because he has dissociative personality disorder. And, you know, the psychiatrist is like, you know, who am I talking to now? If I'm remembering it, like it's been a while. And all of his personalities they're talking about the other personalities like they know them. And I don't know a whole lot about dissociative personality disorder to know if that's like accurate or anything, if these personalities all, you know, they inhabit the same space and communicate with each other. So I just saw that, like what I saw is the situation of just like looking back on it, because there's not, I mean, other than the main cast, there's not really anyone else, you know, that inhabits this world that the motel exists in, except for there's two that I can recall. There was the one where the first one of Paris's flashback where she had her John tied up on the bed. Which I just rationalized as like, well, that's a memory of her. Of course, she's going to have these memories. You know, she's just like, who knows what this procedure is that they're inducing on Malcolm, where everyone is kind of meeting each other for the first time, or, you know, most of them are meeting each other. So she might just be thrust in there with these memories of this personality that this had happened to her. It doesn't necessarily mean, you know, like none of this is real, like we're saying. Right. So like the rules are kind of, you know, they're very vague. And then the other one is the original motel manager, whose body they see and they find in the fridge that, you know, John Hawkes had put in there. And I mean, again, because he mentions how, you know, he'd been working there for months, and, you know, people would drive up and he would, you know, let them come in, but we never see them. He says that this has happened because that's part of his memories. So yeah, the only thing that didn't make sense is that body that was there. But again, like rules, I mean, that could just be something that was that the doctors had, you know, implanted in whatever that they were doing here. And then there's going to be a dead body that falls out of the fridge, you know. However this happens. So I think that, like, with a lot of it, it's, if all these personalities, you know, were getting together for the first time, and you do have this family of the husband, the wife, and the kid, you know, it could be easy that they would, you know, basically it's like a dream. It has no beginning or end. So it just starts, and they're on the road, and they're in this rainstorm, and they, you know, they think that they know where they were before that, but, like, they're not seeing it, and we're not seeing it because we're just seeing what's actually happening in you know, the present time.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, I mean, all it did was just kind of, like, logistically, because I remember in terms of just, like, them interacting, I remember moments that, again, I don't know if this is, like, true to life or anything like that, in that TV movie, Sybil, that Sally Field did, where she had dissociative personality disorder, and there were times where one would tell another with her mouth, like, she would switch from, like, one person to another, and the person would tell her, "Don't you dare tell," and the other person would shift and be like, "Oh no, there's no problem," you know, whatever. And so there was some interaction, I guess, and also there was a lot of knowledge about who was in the driver's seat of, like, the body when they were moving through it. And again, I don't know how true to life that movie was either, but it felt more, I don't know if the word isn't palatable, but it felt like easy to digest. Like, I was just kind of like, okay, that seems to make sense, at least in the moment as you're watching a movie and things are going, and you're just kind of like moving on to the next moment. But this one, that was a record skip moment for me, just in terms of, like, the family. I'd be interested to do some more research if I had that time to find out if that's a thing. But
there's a commentary. There's two commentaries on the Blu-ray, at least. There was the director's and a writer's commentary, and I didn't have the time to listen to it. And you know how we've talked about how, you know, we feel about single person commentaries. They're usually kind of a slog to get through, because it's like one person having to, you know,
it depends on the person. If you're cool talking on your own, then maybe, but some people just sit there and just describe what's going on screen, and that's interminable. But Michael Cooney, though, the screenwriter, there's only two other projects of his that I was familiar with, and it's Jack Frost and Jack Frost 2. Unfortunately,
like the Michael Keaton one?
No,
the horror
movie one, the one where Shannon Elizabeth.
I've never seen it.
Assaulted with a carrot. He takes his carrot nose and puts it somewhere else, and then
Shannon Elizabeth has been through the ringer. You know?
She really has, and I think that was her first movie. I think that was even her first movie. So we love you, Shannon Elizabeth. We respect you. He did one other movie that looked like it was a horror movie that I had never heard of. It's called Six Souls. It was released in 2010. That he wrote the screenplay for it, and it starred Julianne Moore and Frances Conroy. I know nothing about it. I'm a little intrigued because if you know, it followed this movie. I mean, I feel like this movie is certainly an improvement on the two Jack Frost movies. So if anything that followed that would hopefully, you know, just continue the incline. But because I haven't heard anything about it, like at least Identity, I had heard about in its release. I heard enough about it to be motivated to see it. I wonder about Six Souls. But the other thing is, because I looked up James Mangold again, because I knew the name. I had seen Logan, and I knew I had seen other movies of his, but thing is, I think James Mangold is another director who he is kind of notorious for making movies that when I do see them, I only see them once, with one exception. The only movie of his that I think I've seen maybe 4 or 5 times is Girl Interrupted. And it was interesting because realizing that he directed that movie, I have a kind of similar reaction to that one as I do to this, in terms of like, really, really good idea, really, really good cast. Even some really, really good things were executed within the body of this, but there were some problems that needed to be solved that just don't ever feel like they did for me to make it a classic, you know? And And I loved Logan, but I saw it once. It was so sad, and I'll never see it again.
Yeah.
He did 3:10 to Yuma, good movie, but saw it once. Never need to see it again. And yeah, so I think that's
He also
just,
did
it's also just in terms
the
of like,
Wolverine.
the
second Wolverine. So he did the second and the third Wolverine movies. The third one being Logan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And
Logan made up for the Wolverine.
Logan made up for the first two Wolverine movies for sure. I Walk the Line as well. I've never seen that.
Still haven't seen.
And I've only seen Girl Interrupted once when that first came out. But I mean, like Winona Ryder and Angelina
Jolie,
yeah.
Clea Duvall
and
again,
Brittany Murphy.
Brittany Murphy,
yeah.
Kill me. Yeah, she was insane. I mean, her performance was off the charts, incredible. But
I gotcha.
But the most recent movie he directed, I didn't see either, and I had no impulse to see it. Was Ford v Ferrari with I think it was Matt Damon and somebody else. And somebody else.
Pitt? No.
Or Cooper? Which Brad was it?
Christian Bale.
Oh, it was Christian Bale. Okay. Yeah. One of those guys. Didn't see it, didn't feel the need at all, still don't. And I just think whatever it is that motivates him as a filmmaker, even if it's like content that I'm like, yes, I would be into that. Yeah. Maybe the way he frames it, the way he, presents it is just not for my taste.
Fair enough.
It's just,
That's fair. I mean, I think like of all the movies of his that I have watched, that I they're all entertaining of his. So the end.
The ones that I enjoyed,
the end of this movie you like.
Okay, this is the thing. I mean, spoilers for Halloween 4, everybody. But do you mind? But, I mean, okay, let's just say people at the end of that movie, there are a lot of people who hate it and give it a thumbs down. I have always adored the ending of that movie. Mm-hmm. So when this happened, and we get kind of like a similar situation where somebody who you never suspected would be capable of doing something heinous and killing off, an unsuspecting surviving character.
Well, not only that, but at that point, we were led to believe that Timmy was dead.
Yeah. So the fact that he's reintroduced as being alive, and then also I love the fact that everything about it's completely tonally different for me from the entire rest of the movie, because it does feel more camp. Just the fact that she is she's finally digging up the soil and planting her oranges and
finds the key.
Yeah,
and that was another thing. Okay, because the
yes.
the keys would show up after every murder occurred, and that was another thing, because the reason that they realized that the mother was dead because they heard the key drop, but every suspect was in the room, so that was one clue to let you know that it was supernatural. And they find the key and bodies start disappearing or whatever, but then they're like, wait, we missed a number or whatever. So when she's digging up and she finds the number one key, it's just like, but she's not dead yet. That doesn't make any sense. But just for the purposes of plot and the twist, it was just like, I really dig that.
Yeah, and also the fact that she picks it up and immediately her hands are quivering. She is so,
and her lip.
She knows. Yeah, her lip and her eyes are welling up, and she's just got this incredible. Amanda Peet gives 100%. I love her, but she's sitting there. The camp part of it is for me the fact that she doesn't raise an arm, she doesn't make any move in a number of. I don't remember. I didn't time it, but it's a number of seconds. A lot of opportunity to roll away,
get out of the way.
To push the kid down, do whatever
He's a little boy.
But all she does is remain frozen in that moment with a quivering lip,
I think,
just waiting her demise.
She had the hoe, She had the hoe, and she dropped it, and he picked it up because that's why he was smacking it into his hand.
Right. But that's why you roll away.
I mean, and we're assuming that she had no idea that she was a personality, that they were personalities inside this guy's head, because only John Cusack knew that at that point. But I mean, I don't question Timmy's ability to overpower people or anything, because they're
yes,
figments in Malcolm's head.
Sure.
So I'm just like, I'm all for that, but I do agree, like it did kind of undermine her character, because I think like throughout most of the movie, we're shown that she doesn't need rescuing. There's a scene where when they discover the body of Jake Busey, and everyone points the finger at John Hawkes, and he grabs her and puts a knife to her throat, and they're like, hey, easy, and she like backs him up into the wall, like she gets herself out of that situation. So I mean, like, she would have been like, I mean, I don't even know if like she could be considered obviously not a final girl because she doesn't make it, but even the fact that she's not even a real entity. But I mean, like, up until that point, like, you know, she seemed pretty capable to handle herself. And then, yes, I agree, in that last moment, you know, there were things she could have done. But what are you going to have, like, this big final girl chase scene of her running through an orange grove with little Timmy, like, walking after her like Michael Myers with his gardening hoe?
I mean, at least it would have been in keeping with like her instinct for survival, just as a character, entity or non-entity, like whatever. Yeah. But I mean, but again, like I didn't bother me, because also that is a little thing about her character though. Like I feel like the two people who were kind of at the end of their rope emotionally the most, you know, like the most kind of fried and the most manic are the two girls in the movie. I feel like it's Ginny and Paris, and that kind of bothered me. But
you wouldn't say that you wouldn't say that John Hawkes' character is, or, you know, even
no, he's certainly impulsive, and he's certainly reckless, and he's certainly irresponsible and you know and not in control at all, but compared to like it's a different reaction.
It's a different kind of energy, but it's still the same.
But he's doing it in reaction to like being accused of shit, or like, you know, like having people scream in his face. They're doing it just because, oh, bad things are happening. Oh Lord, you know, like, and I'm like, okay, we got one character doing that. We don't need you both to do that. I mean, and again, it's not bad.
Well, I find that she didn't start doing it until after Ginny was taken out. So it's just almost like now it's like, now you've been designated the whimpering the whimpering woman, I guess. Of the
basically. And that bothered me. But by the time we got to the end of the movie, I'm just gonna like, well, she's been whimpering for like the last 30 minutes. Like, it makes sense. She just
at that point, all I just like going back to the camp of it all, just like the flashback of just seeing like it was Timmy all along, and how he basically was like Mrs. Voorhees with the knife, you know, coming in there, you know, like, I think, did he even have like the knife? I don't know if he had the belt with the sheath for the knife, because I know that John Cusack found that. I'd have to watch it again, but it was just funny seeing him like walk around with the knife, and and then of course the iconic line. I don't know why this wasn't your line at the start of the episode. Whores don't get a second chance.
I don't like that line. I don't want to say that. No, because that was another thing. That was the thing that just made me say, okay, you're an asshole. And that was another thing in terms of, like, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, and then I'll come back to this, but them kind of suspecting, everybody kind of suspecting on the periphery that Paris's line of work, as it were. Yeah. And I think that it was another clue that they, on some level, they all kind of know what's going on, but in order to kind of like maintain the reality that they've set up for themselves with their backstory and with their context and all of that, they need to continue to just kind of like ride the wave until they can't anymore. Like, because I mean, we saw what it did to Ed when he was being told exactly what was going on and what that did to his, you know, the fabric of his reality. But in terms of like Timothy saying that, because he was echoing an exact line that Larry said, and was Larry the only other one who said it in the movie? That like whores don't.
Larry, the motel manager.
Chance? Yeah. Was he the only other one? Because he said something like that at some point during the movie.
I don't know. He never said whores don't get a second chance, but he called her a whore many times.
He called her a whore, but I feel like I could have felt.
Well, the only other what I was mentioning is that in the deleted scenes, Clea Duvall's character was also called her a whore. That's
But
why
I-
there's that scene where
okay,
she
but I
comes
didn't-
back to. Yeah.
Okay, I could have sworn there was an approximation of that line earlier
it was
because
just-
it did feel like a throwback.
I think it was just him.
But,
But I also liked when those two characters kind of teamed up. Despite their odds, and they're like, okay, we gotta figure out what to do.
Paris and Larry, yeah. Laris. But Perry. But
Stop.
we've
Don't
shipped them.
stop trying
We've
to make
shipped
them happen. It's not.
No, but when Timmy said that, I was just kind of like, oh, you're a piece of shit too. Like, how many of these male personalities? I mean, I guess if he's, like
He's the
a
killer.
murderer, misogyny can't. Well, yeah, misogyny can't be that far away. But it just made me really, really sad that like to imagine that many male personalities or minds, like collectively, like within one mind, would be that misogynistic toward like particularly the female personality that I root for the most. Like that just made me that I couldn't say that line because I couldn't say that line in the beginning because it's not fun to me. It's sad.
It's camp.
I enjoyed the camp. I enjoyed the camp. I did enjoy that, but I also was just like, fuck, what a bleak world.
Yeah.
It's not a happy place, the world of Identity 2003. But
the world, just the world outside of it, or the world of Malcolm Rivers.
It is an unforgiving because while he's killing her, Malcolm Rivers is killing Alfred Molina, or at least choking him.
How
I don't
about
know if he's gonna...
that final shot of the highway road landscape?
Again, stark, empty, vacant.
I like that though. I like that.
Dangerous.
I like the danger.
It's fine.
I also like the so there's a little I guess can we call it a nursery rhyme? It comes up 3 times in the movie. The first, I think it's right at the very beginning.
It's a poem.
Is it a poem?
I saw.
It goes. As I was walking up the stairs, I saw a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. I wish.
I wish.
Why do you gotta peer at me? I'm trying to say it.
I'm sorry.
Which is just like, it's almost like a riddle too, because it's just like it's one of those things that it doesn't make any sense. So it's within the structure, like in the theme of the movie. But the first time we hear it it might have been John Cusack's character who says it at the beginning, like of some like.
I thought it was Ray Liotta. I thought it was Ray Liotta's voice, but I couldn't.
But
tell.
then
I thought it was him.
But then we see that's kind of like that's something that he says to himself. Ed says to himself, like I guess when he's having his I guess the moments where he's kind of going in and out of personalities or just what he's doing because he's like doing that thing like pinching his. Between his eyes there, and he's repeating it to himself, but then we hear it again at the very end being whispered by Timmy, after the bleakness of the world of Identity. So there's definitely not going to be an Identity 2. We're not going to see a sequel of Malcolm Rivers under the influence of Timmy going around and killing people. That's basically it.
Do you think that the world of Identity is a shared universe with the world of Final Destination?
Nope.
Just because...
Where did that come from?
I think Malcolm is related to Clear.
Sometimes your headcanon, it makes no sense to me.
I mean, because also Final Destination does have this kind of like bleak, inescapable fate.
So are you saying that? Okay, so are you saying that
moniker.
like Final Destination is like the world of Identity, or Final Destination exists inside Malcolm Rivers' head?
The former, not the latter. I don't think Final Destination exists in Malcolm's head. That's too much. No, I just
and there's also
think
the fact that Clear Rivers predates Malcolm by 3 years as well.
That's fine.
Okay.
So there can't be a shared universe? They have to be released at the exact same time.
I don't need a sequel. I don't need a shared universe. This is one of those like movies for me that it just like it stands alone. And I wish more movies were like this. I wish more horror properties, just like had this mindset of just like, we don't need to like go bigger, let's just focus on making one movie.
Okay.
No shared universes, no MCUs or DC things. You know more about that than I do.
Yeah, look who you're talking to about it. But at the same time, like, I just thought it was funny when I wrote down Malcolm Rivers' name, and I was just kind of like, we had just done the Final Girl discussion, and I was thinking Clear Rivers was very fresh in my head. She almost never is, so I just kind of thought like, oh, that'd be funny. But anyway, no, this movie ultimately, like, I can see the value in it. I would never disparage anybody for being a fan or admiring the work that was done within it. I even myself admire some of the work within it, but I don't find it kind of blissfully flawed enough to want to return to it over and over again. In fact, I may wait another 20 or so years before I attempt to see it again.
Fair.
But
fair enough.
yeah. But it was fine. It got there. There.
Oh,
That's what.
Yeah, and I think, we had a good run. Like, we were doing episodes there. Like every movie I loved. I think because we did The Thing, we did Get Out, Scream 2, something like the last. Like I know you did last summer, Black Phone, and Us. We're like tepid.
For you.
And, especially like after what I said about Us. And like very similar with Us, like, we have a movie with a twist at the end. And, I talked about how, like I didn't like that M. Night Shyamalan, style of like having an entire movie based on a twist. But, in the case of Identity, I not to say that I think that Us was one of those movies, because I think that Us still works without the twist at the end. This one, obviously, the twist is required, but it's also, the twist doesn't define the movie either. There's so much more going on in it for me that, even if this was a straight up murder mystery, slasher, whatever, I'd have been like, fine. I've been like, this is still a good movie. It's, it's got, Hitchcockian qualities. I've been happy with it. For me, the twist elevates it to, something even greater. So it's a yes from me.
Yay!
Anyway, shall we get to the cherry picker?
Yes!
All right. All right, so first order of business, we got to pick a cherry on top. I think I know where you're going with this, but I'm personally going to, throw Paris out there as my pick for the cherry on top.
Absolutely.
Okay. I thought maybe you would say Malcolm Rivers, but like
he's not on screen enough.
Yeah. He's actually
great. That's a great performance.
Amanda Peet, I just recently, I don't know if you've seen the show Dirty John.
No.
It's like an anthology of like true crime, true like American crime, and the second season is based on Betty Broderick, who was a woman who was convicted of murdering her husband and his new wife. Like it was like her ex-husband and his new wife, and it's like 8 episodes or something, and it's like Amanda Peet plays Betty Broderick. And the whole thing is just like it's so well done, and she just like delivers such an amazing performance because she's taking like this character, this woman who, for the most part is just like portrayed as like, being this monster who, murdered her ex-husband, but she like brings so much nuance to it because like they're exploring this history of, what drove her to commit the murder. Like she was being gaslit for years and years, and it gets to like a point that's just like you don't condone what she does, but you understand it, and like for like an actor to have that ability to make an audience feel like empathetic of who they are and what they did is incredible. So I mean, like, if you could find it, I think it's on Netflix. Check it out. If you're an Amanda Peet stan.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, like, I think that she definitely deserves the cherry on top. My one gripe
I do too.
with her character is because I mean she's also into astrology, which is cool, but she says to John Cusack, she's just like, when's your birthday? She's like, May, Taurus, just like me. And it's just like, there's May Geminis, like don't discount, you know, the other signs, but that's it. That's the only gripe.
Oh wow!
Okay.
But I just very briefly, because most recent thing I saw her do was an HBO talking head series by the Duplass brothers called Togetherness, where she played a role very similar to the one you're describing, in the sense that she is not the most sympathetic person on paper, you know, like in the world, and yet she is so utterly watchable, and I am always just like, what are you doing with your life, honey? Come on, get it together. And I can't stop watching her, and she's so watchable. I love watchable actors.
Yeah.
So
she was also I noticed too, because I just did like a rewatch of Seinfeld. She was on like an episode. She was like Jerry's girlfriend for one thing. I know she was like very high maintenance, or that was like her whole shtick. All right. Anyway, last week we asked you who deserves to die the most in Us, between Kitty Tyler and Adelaide Wilson. I chose Kitty. Yeah. You chose Adelaide. Across Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube, 134 for Kitty versus 282 for Adelaide. Hey. You have dethroned me. My winning streak is over.
For now.
You know, you might go on a tear here, but
maybe.
But do you want to?
That's lovely, though. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for everyone who voted. You should have voted my way, though. Just let's see what people are saying. Heather Marie says, "This is one of my absolute favorite movies. I think it's genius. Can't wait to watch the video you all put out on it." Okay, obviously we're recording this and it hasn't been released yet.
Yeah.
But let's say Ayaz, again, I'm not going to say this right. Ayaz Kamzik. There's a lot of like symbols over letters, so I'm so sorry. Okay. But love both of them, but sometimes I question, does Adelaide actually love her family, considering her true origins? But since she gave birth to them and they are her children, and she married the man she wanted, I guess she does. I think she learned normal emotions and behavior after living in the normal world. I don't think that there's ever a question on whether she loves her own family. I think that's you know, that's
interesting.
That's very evident, like, you know, from the get-go. But yeah.
From the tribalism angle for sure. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting. I'd be interested in delving into that even more so, because I've never heard that brought up before. I'd be interested in knowing, like, why. All right, go on. Yeah, that's great.
Blue Box 87. Yay! I can finally agree with Eddie. Adelaide.
Yay!
I love, like, the one movie that we get to where I'm just like, I don't know, I don't care. I'll just throw a name out there. That's where you end up winning. Thomas Baker says, I choose Adelaide Wilson because she killed the real Adelaide. So that way nobody will know the real truth about her.
Yeah, except her son.
Jason, yeah. And then Sam Levy says, Kitty was written to be as hateful and obnoxious as possible, so I went with her. Adelaide, in quotations, may have been the doppelganger, but she really married her husband and gave birth to her children, so I don't see her as a threat to them in any way.
But she's a threat to... Okay,
she's
not a threat to her.
She's a threat to the real Adelaide.
To her blood relatives and the man she married. So it doesn't matter that she's a complete threat to her doppelganger, her surface dweller self. Anyway, okay, whatever.
So that's the opposite of what was brought up earlier.
Yeah, interesting. All right.
So you get first dibs with this movie.
Okay, I have a question because they are fully formed characters, but so all the personalities are fair game given the rules.
I think given the rules, which I don't have them in front of me, but I would say that they do apply here because it's a consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, I can look over the rules right now. I can tell you what they say, and we'll get to the bottom of this because that is a good point.
Okay, cool.
Because maybe if, in that case things should be reworked on, but I don't know. So bear with me here. Okay.
All
right. So the official rules: 1, each nomination must not exceed a maximum of 1 individual. 2, the nominee must either be human or anthropomorphic in appearance. I think that counts for multiple personalities. 3, if the nominee is a supernatural, scientific, or extraterrestrial being, they may only count as a valid nomination if they are shown to inhabit their original form. I don't think that they're not supernatural, scientific, or extraterrestrial, so that doesn't matter. And then 4, if the nominee is a supernatural, scientific, or extraterrestrial being, they may only count as a valid nomination if they are distinguishable as their own unique and autonomous entity separate from a hive mind. I think, again, it doesn't apply because it's not supernatural, scientific, or extraterrestrial, but you can distinguish each identity as their own unique and autonomous
They're certainly not a hive mind. There is a splintering. Yeah. Okay.
The nominee must be physically seen on screen and exist within the real time of their applicable media. So I think that we do see these people on screen. It's not like a multiple person. Like if we had just seen them through Malcolm, I don't think that they would count in that way.
Right.
And what is going on in his head? It's real to him. Like that's within the movie.
Yes.
I think that's where it would get blurry.
Because it's also real to us for the first hour and 15 minutes of the movie. So
it's
okay.
Yeah. Maybe I should put something in here like contingent on like twists or something. And then 6, if the nominee only appears in a dream or flashback, it must be originating to the applicable media. So I mean, like, these are neither dreams nor flashbacks, but I mean, like,
no.
I would say I'd like there's no way that it would. I mean, I never thought that the rules would interrupt a nomination for any of the personalities, but I think that the rules. Well, it's not clear, that it's. I think that we can allow it. If anyone has a problem, too bad.
Yeah, too bad. We already made the decision as of you're watching this.
Yeah.
So. All right, my choice for the cherry picker then, who deserves to die the most, is Timmy York. Young Timothy. Because I find him just as threatening as kind of like the most threatening of the personalities, among them Officer Rhodes, Robert, who's Jake Busey's role, and at times Larry, John Hawkes' role. But I find him even more threatening than them because he has a guise of innocence that made nobody suspect him at all the entire movie, and because I don't understand what he's going through. Because is he just a tremendous actor, and that's why he was weeping when his mother personality had died? Or was he and he was just putting on a show? Or was he literally like just so erratically emotional that he does mourn her and miss her because his mommy's gone, but is also like overtaken by his own? I mean, is he a splintered personality within a separate personality? Like, I mean, there are so many unanswered questions. I feel like he is the darkest like remains kind of like of the poor mind of Malcolm Rivers, and he's in the driver's seat by the end of the movie. Like he needs to die yesterday, and I'm terrified of him, and I don't like that a boy that age is capable of saying the line that I will not say. So fuck him, kill him. I want him gone.
Just to touch upon what you were saying, the flashback that we see where it just shows like how he managed to kill some of the people where he didn't actually kill them is because he was playing that game with her where, you know, they were pressed up against the glass, and then he backed up, which caused her to back up. So he, you know, had seen that the car was coming, so he did that, you know, to make sure that she would get hit. And then he did a similar thing with his stepdad, because he's like, stay right there, Timothy. And then he walked out into the laneway because he knew that the father would push him out of the way to save him and then get hit by the car.
But
so he had the presence of mind to do that. But his reactions at the time were to keep, because you have to remember, like, all these people, none of them knew that they were different personalities within Malcolm's mind. So he's meeting all these people for the first time, other than his parents, in his mind within the mind, and he's obviously going around and killing them, but he doesn't, you know, he has to act innocent. He has to put on these airs of just like, mommy, you know, or I don't even think he says anything. He just like starts whimpering. So he, he has to play the part of the kid.
But what motivates that? Like, does he have the presence of mind to know I have to? Nobody can suspect that I do this, so I'm going to just be a tremendous actor and weep because she's gone. Or is he literally going through something that strategically, like, just happens to work in his favor? Like, I feel like he's a mystery that I almost never want solved. I just want him out. Lights out. That's what I want.
You're overthinking it.
I want him gone. That's what I do.
I know.
The king of headcanon.
Okay. Honestly, like, my first inclination is to go for, you know, a character we didn't even really mention, but it was just like, you know, really pissed me off, and that's Judge Taylor, who, you know, was the presiding judge at the hearing, who was aggravated that, you know, he had to even be there, you know, even though that there was the evidence that was missed that could, you know, exonerate this man who's literally being sentenced to death in mere hours, and it's like an inconvenience that, you know, obviously, like, he's a criminal who's, you know, been convicted of murdering people, but it's just like his position is so just like, you know, I've been dragged out of bed for this, like, are we gonna get this over with? He wants to start the fucking thing before, you know, the guy's even there. Like, he's clearly not following legal protocol, but then, like, I don't think anyone will even know who I'm talking about if I nominate this guy. The other option is Rhodes, Ray Liotta, who I already feel weird about nominating because Ray Liotta, who's just passed away. But I also, but the thing is, like, I also like watching him. Like, I you know, get a kick out of, you know, watching Ray Liotta be the bad guy. So you know, at this point, I mean, I don't care. I'm gonna pick Judge Taylor because fuck that guy. So yeah, sorry, I had to work it out in my head there. So
no,
you
of
know,
course,
I might lose this one, but I'm just being true to myself in this case.
No,
so.
If we had been confined to, like, the actual, like, realm of consciousness that is reality as you and I perceive it, I probably would have chosen Dr. Malik because he's a hideous failure at what he does. Like, the whole movie basically ends the way it does because he failed. So
he already got the death sentence for that. The movie cherry picked him for us. So those are your two options. You can pick Timothy York, or you can pick Judge Taylor, and you know, vote your heart, vote your conscience. That is open to Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube polls.
Yep.
I also, speaking of Patreon, would like to welcome 2 new patron supporters. So we got Kyle Carr with a K, and Zombie Cakes with the Z on the end. Nice. Hey. So thank you for coming aboard. Also, speaking of Patreon, you briefly mentioned this, but you know, we do a bonus episode every month. You know, probably mention this every episode by now, but July's episode, we will be ranking all of the final girls. I mean, I say all, but a lot. I mean,
85.
There were 85 in total. What we could agree on of like the ones that we know and we've seen movies for. So not all of them have been there, but I'm sure all the ones that you would think of, you know, that would come to mind immediately, they're all there. Supersized episode that is available to Freddy Krueger tier supporters and above. So if you want to head over to Patreon and support my main YouTube channel and the podcast, by doing that, you will have access to that. That's going to be released on the 20th. So I believe that's tomorrow, if you're watching this by the time this one releases. So check out that, and also if you're on the tiers underneath that, think about upgrading. But on that note, I do want to thank Andre Felix, who helped edit that episode and helps. I shouldn't say help. He does edit it. He does all of the editing. So credit where credit is deserved. But also, just a reminder that if you are new to the Cherry Picker, you can listen to it if you are watching it on YouTube. The RSS feed link is in the descriptions below. And if you are listening to it for the first time and you want to watch the video, then you can go look for us on YouTube, the Cherry Picker. Also, we have a Apple Podcast review.
Yay! What?
Which is always fun when we get these. I'll read that to you. So from Dreaming Dan, must for horror fans. I'm so in love with this podcast as a horror fan who got a little rusty over the years. This has reignited my passion, and I find myself dusting off the old DVD collection, adding to it, and watching horror flicks regularly again. Zack and Eddie have great chemistry, and it's a joy to listen to them. Eddie coming in, having seen the film once or twice with a few notes, and Zack being the kind of person that has seen the film 10 times in the last couple of months and went online to look up the blueprints of the house that one scene was shot at because he needed to know what was behind that door. I think is that in reference to the Who Killed Who?
Probably.
Yeah. Both draw from a wealth of knowledge and are all about celebrating the genre. There's no cynicism, and no one has their head up their rear end. While they're not shy with their criticism, it always comes from a constructive place of love for the genre. I wholeheartedly recommend the Cherry Picker, and I'm excited to see where this still relatively young podcast goes from here.
Yay.
Thank you, Dreaming Dan.
Thank you.
And you know what? I'm right there with you, because I had my period of time where the horror genre wasn't in the forefront of my life or anything. So I'm happy to have gotten back into it in the last 5 or so years.
Yeah, reconnecting with your favorites is a good way to just kind of like domino effect back into a horror genre. If anybody's just like getting their feet wet again, like start a collection and start with your favorites.
Yeah. I think it's and it's important to own physical media too, because I mean, like you can't count on everything always being available there. At least your favorite, whatever your favorites are, I would recommend get starting there. But anyway, social media, if you guys aren't subscribed yet, please subscribe to this channel on YouTube. If you want to leave your own review on Apple Podcasts, that is greatly appreciated, and it goes a long way in helping us get discovered algorithmically. We are also on Instagram at the Cherry Picker Pod, both the Instagram and the YouTube, as well as my Patreon is where you can vote in the Cherry Picker. And then individually, our social media, where can they find you, Eduardo?
You can find me at Edward is Truth, one word, on Instagram as previously stated. And if you want to check out some of my movie reactions that I have already posted on my own YouTube channel, go to Edward is Truth, one word, and watch me watch movies. It's fun.
And you can find me on Instagram at retrobitchface, all one word. I'm also on Twitter at ZackCherry8. And my YouTube, just look up Zack Cherry. It's with a K. And I do not do movie reactions because, I don't know how to have fun like that.
I would argue against that. But
that I don't do movie reactions?
No, that you know how to have fun.
I know.
Like that.
What do we got going on next week?
Next week, we have that movie with the thing in the water with the fin and the teeth that underneath.
Kristen Stewart?
Yes, exactly.
You said underwater. So.
Spoiled everything. No, we're seeing Jaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is next week, so join us again, and thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we will be right back.